Welcome to Shardcast, the Brandon Sanderson podcast. We are a bunch, or at least 3, mega fans bringing you the latest news discussion and a bunch of opinions on Brandon Sanderson and the Cosmere. We are back once again with a Secret Project episode, but before we go into that, I am Argent. They call me Evgeni in some places, and we have Jofwu with us on this episode.
Yeah, my name's Joshua. Jofwu. I like that one. That's a good one. It's probably my favorite pronunciation of the username. But
Mispronunciation.
Probably most people call me Jofwu. Jofwu.
Yeah, you are one of the few people who are wrong about your username pronunciation.
That's okay.
And we also have Danielle. Hi.
Yes, also known as FelCandy, which is not hard to pronounce.
No, maybe you should come up with a new username that we can have fights about during the intro.
FelCandy.
Flu can't die.
Yes.
And I, because I don't know how to do intro properly, already introduced myself. So, today we are talking about the third of Brandon's secret projects. We are going to be spoiling the heck out of that novel. We're also going to be talking about the words of Brandon that came out of the respective stream for this story. And we'll probably also bring up a couple of things from previous secret projects, notably Secret Project 1. We will not be talking anything about Secret Project 4. So this is our spoiler policy for the episode. Obviously, this is Shardcast. We're going to be talking about all things Cosmere. So if you're not caught up on everything else, I'm sorry, put this in your watch later and come back in 3 years when you're fully caught up with the 17 billion books that Brandon has written in that time. And then you can watch this. But we'll take like 3 seconds for you to pause the video and leave if you need to leave. And we're going into the episode. Okay, cool. Secret Project 3, Yumi and the Nightmare Painter, is an extremely evocative name to me. I know, and Trest of the Emerald Sea also has a certain vibe, but Yumi and the Nightmare Painter just gave me, from the title quote unquote screen, I was like, wow, what is this? But before we jump into analyzing the title and everything in the book, we do have a couple of very small news points that came out of the stream that we should get out of the way. First one, we have the artist for this book. If you missed Brandon's announcement or our commentary on it, each one of the secret projects is, instead of Isaac Stewart, the former art director of Dragonsteel and now VP of creative development or something like that, instead of him directing all of the art in each one of the books, now he is essentially handing each book to a different artist and saying, do with it what you will. And obviously he's going to help and consult and do things like that. But first one was Howard Lyon. Second one Steve Argyle?
I think so.
And third one is an artist that we haven't seen in the Dragonsteel sphere of influence, and that is Aaliyah Chen. She is... She has art in all sorts of places. I heard somewhere she was one of the people who worked on Arcane, which has gotten people really excited. And if you go take a look at her art, which if we were prepared, we would have had like... Well, we'll try to put a link either in a comment or in the description. But if you look her up, her art style seems like a very, very good fit.
It's very cinematic. And I think she works for Netflix.
Yeah.
Yeah, as like a creative kind of consultant or something.
She posted after this announcement, she posted on Instagram a sketch of Hoyd that she did. That was really fun. So check it out.
very, very excited to see what she does with the book. And fortunately, gets a little bit more freedom than other artists in the other books, because for Yumi and the Nightmare Painter, unlike the other secret projects, we are getting 3 colors in the book in addition to the normal white and black. So instead of, just an accent, so like Secret Project 1 might be like blue tinted or whatever. For Yumi, we're gonna have a blue, kind of a magenta, which is very fitting for the world, as we're gonna see, and we're also gonna have gold, I believe.
I think it's 2 accent colors in the book. The gold was the foiling.
Oh,
on
the
outside.
cover.
Foil.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah.
Yep.
But being able to play with
So-
blue and magenta,
Yeah, for this book, which,
especially,
if you know, then you know. Yeah, it's going to be really cool. I'm excited.
will make the illustrations fantastic. Which concludes the news roundup. Anything else we want to talk about before we go into the book?
Nope, let's do it.
Great. So we have a summary written down for you.
Yes.
And before we jump into that, I just want to say that, to circle back to the title from earlier, I had the wrong idea about what a Nightmare Painter is when I read the title. So obviously, or maybe not obviously, there are 2 ways to interpret that phrase, right? One of them is somebody who paints nightmares,
Mhm.
and the other one is a painter who is a nightmare. And I definitely defaulted to the second one, which created
like it
a
was an
different image.
antagonist or something.
It's a book about
not
a book about Yumi having nightmares with painters in them.
I'm essentially right. So I didn't think antagonist. I thought Brandon would go in a direction of building a world full of nightmares in some capacity, and but those nightmares will have like a normal society, so to speak, and then we would follow one of them who happens to be a painter.
I see.
Which not quite, not exactly.
I mean, could be a nightmare for her.
It's a fun thing with a lot of these titles is I think that they are. I understand people not wanting to know what they are, but it is kind of they're so creative. Like you just don't know what to make of them. I like that.
Yeah. But with this out of the way, Fel, let's talk summary. What
Sure.
happens in the first, what is it, like 8 chapters of
7.
Yumi and the Nightmare Painter?
I believe it was 7.
Sure.
That's how many I have, anyways. So in chapter 1, in the city of Kilahito, Nikoro, or Painter as he prefers to be known, is walking along the Shroud of Darkness at the edge of town, and he's patrolling for nightmares as a loner. And even when 2 other painters, Akane and Tojin, have invited him to walk with them. Then in chapter 2, we go to another land, Torio, the chosen Yokihijo, girl of commanding spirits, Yumi, performs ritual bathing and preparations for her prayers. And she asks her warden Nimi, Liyun, if she could attend the upcoming festival. However, she's persuaded that she doesn't want to embarrass her station by being ungrateful. Back in chapter 3, we are in the metropolis of Kilahito again. Painter continues his rounds. He's passing these large murals done by practicing painters, and he catches a sight of signs of a nightmare that had passed his own practice mural, which was a painting of some distant planet that he had been covering up in white paint. As he follows the shadows, he finally finds it dripping black liquid and trying to enter a house. He starts to paint some bamboo, and it starts to shapeshift into kind of a mimicry of his art. And once he finishes his painting, the nightmare turned bamboo evaporates. Chapter 4. At the place of ritual in Torio, Yumi performs her art, a balancing rock sculpture in a particularly hot, stony field. And as she stacks these rocks in a deliberate mathematical pattern, her act of creation summons 37 spirits, or hijo, to rise around her. At the end of many, many hours of labor, Yumi convinces the hijo to become needed or necessary objects for the townspeople, such as lights or floating devices. And at the end of her ritual, she collapses, exhausted. Chapter 5, we go back to Painter. He's being criticized by the foreman for always painting bamboo, but as he says, bamboo works. He collects his pay and he continues to the Noodle Pupil, a restaurant, and where he's being watched by someone we know as Wit or Hoyd in disguise. And he orders his usual food, his noodles, from a human-looking design. As he leaves, he spots the telltale sign of another nightmare that's passing by. In chapter 6, Yumi wakes up. She's feeling very guilty about these conflicting emotions that she had after her ritual. Leon, her warden, chides her for not always reaching her potential and for pretending to be less skilled than she was the other times that she's done the ritual. And after this, what I would consider verbal abuse, Yumi thinks about running away, and she hears a spirit in her voice, or in her head, and she agrees to help this spirit become free, whatever that means, and all goes black for her. Then in the last chapter, chapter 7, Painter finds the nightmare that he was following. It's almost fully formed. It's feasting on the fear of a young boy in his home. He starts to paint bamboo, but he finds he needs to switch to something more similar to what the nightmare could have been. And as he finishes his painting, which happens to be the child's mom, the nightmare starts to flee. And he heads out to the offices to report the incident to his foreman when he's suddenly hit with overwhelming tiredness, and he blacks out. When he wakes up, he feels heat. He sees a bright orange light all around him. He looks up and sees his reflection as who we know as Yumi. And then he screams. End of part 1.
One or two very small things I want to either double check or correct. Painter actually does make his way back to his apartment. He thinks about going to the foreman, but actually collapses in his apartment. And 2, was it a reflection that he sees, or does he see beside him lay a young woman? You'd recognize her as you. So I read that as like they're two separate.
Oh, see, I pictured it as he turned around and he sees Yumi looking back at him, and they both scream at the same time because it's the reflection. So when he screams, it's Yumi's face screaming.
Interesting. Okay.
But I don't know if that's how it actually is.
In the inspirations that Brandon talks about after the text, he says that, to give a mild spoiler for the next few chapters of Yumi, it says that Painter is like, everybody is going to see Painter as Painter as Yumi, so they think that he is Yumi, and then we're actually going to see them switch worlds, and we're going to see the opposite happen in Painter's world. And so they are they're Painter and, well, so I'm trying to make this clear, I guess. Painter and Yumi are like two separate entities still. Like, she's an incorporeal. He says that she has gone incorporeal. So I think they're going to be able to interact with each other, but then we'll see them switch places when they go to the other world, if that makes sense. So that's kind of the premise for the book, I guess.
And notably, I don't remember if that was in the inspirations or in the stream, or, well, I guess it couldn't have been anywhere else. But I think Brandon said that it's not a body swap situation, because there's some yucky stuff with actual body swap of young adults, or there could be. So it's purely a perception thing, right?
Mm-hmm. So basically, he's saying that Painter will perceive himself as being Painter, but everybody else sees him and sees Yumi instead.
Yeah.
Yep.
Got it.
Yep. And presumably that's part of the reason why he sees Yumi as Yumi incorporeal next to him.
I think that is a good recipe for some hijinks.
Yeah.
Insane hijinks. Would be interesting to see if the incorporeal one of them on the respective worlds will be able to affect the world in any capacity. Because then you're kind of throwing into a funny ghost story into the mix as well.
It'll be really interesting, I think, to see Yumi guiding Painter, because they're complete opposites in my estimation of them. I mean, he's kind of he doesn't do his best. He does whatever gets by. You know, he paints bamboo because that's easiest to paint.
It works.
And Yumi is here like working on these sculptures for hours and hours until her fingers are bleeding, and then she feels bad about it because like she feels guilty for not doing her best every time.
There's some interesting like comparisons between the two. I think they have some similarities and some differences. So like that's their work ethic is like vastly different. I think that it's interesting how they both like I guess worry about judgment from other people.
I wouldn't say that Painter is worried about judgment. It's he writes that line that, in my experience, many young men do, where you are trying to look cool, but you are not, and there is this well of insecurity that craves attention and approval. But of course, you're not gonna say that you want attention and approval, right?
I think they go into that when he's at the noodle pupil, and Design surprisingly had some good introspection about that.
She did actually, yeah. I do love, and maybe this belongs to a later section more appropriately, but I think it's a fine place to bring it up. I do love the way the narrator, the way Hoyd every now and then makes just the tiniest jabs at Painter with things like, oh, but he didn't end up doing the thing that was good for him, and things like that.
He does seem a lot more sympathetic to Yumi, which I understand, like given her the circumstances that she's in. But let's talk more about Hoyd, I think, because that's kind of the first similarity with Secret Project 1 that we've seen, right? Is we get another Hoyd narrated book.
Yep. Sure. Yeah. Let's do that. Obviously, this is Hoyd is telling us another story. The tone and the voice of this story is a bit different from what we hear back in Tress, right? To me, it is clear that this is still Hoyd. Like having read the excerpts of Tress and having known that this is Hoyd, going into this, page 1 was just immediate. Yep, I recognize Hoyd, right? I was kind of maybe not expecting it, but wondering if that would be the case, and the confirmation was near instantaneous. This being said, it is not the same voice, right? Tress is much closer to like a modern fairy tale. Obviously, Princess Bride is the big name that gets cited there, and so Hoyd's voice is a lot more. It's a lot more whimsical. It has a lot more interjections and commentaries as the story goes along. He comments on things that are happening a lot more. In here, he still does that a bit, but the way I'm reading it is, in the first one, he's telling a fairy tale, and in this one, he is telling a story to someone else. And so in the first one, he adopts a different voice, a more fairy tale like voice, and in this one, he is closer to his more natural voice and commentary and things like that. In other Brandon books, any other Brandon, like any book that is not narrated by Hoyd, that is not, like, you are not going to mistake, Edge Dancer for something that is being narrated by Hoyd. It is just not his voice at all, right?
Well, in this one, we have him in parentheses saying things like, "What would you expect of a renowned interdimensional storyteller?" And so it seems a lot more casual in the setting that he's telling this, whereas in Secret Project 1, it sounds more like a campfire story or something, like he's just telling a story around to a group of people. And this one seems like the people that he's talking to know him, and he's telling them the story for some kind of a reason.
I do think it's really fun that Brandon has written Hoyd so well that we can identify his voice even when he's got like different tones to it.
Mm.
That's really fun. And it's also, I think, worth mentioning that Brandon said he's exploring with these different voices of Hoyd so that he can ultimately write. He can find the right voice for Dragonsteel, which is
Mm.
exciting to see. So one thing that came up in the stream a lot was that the events in the story we can consider them to be canonical, that Hoyd might embellish a small thing here or there. Obviously his like commentary on the side is coming from him as the storyteller, but the events of the story are something that we can assume are true and accurate. There was a lot of people that were asking about that. So
it's like nonfiction fiction in his world.
Yeah.
yeah.
Yes.
In the Cosmere, it's
He's
nonfiction.
retelling something that actually happened, that he observed in some capacity, and
Based on the real life story.
Mhm.
And on this note, there is a word of Brandon from the stream where Sleepy People asks Brandon about Hoyd's ability to convey these events and how accurate that is, and how is he observing these things. How much can we believe him in this? And Brandon's answer is essentially it's a combination of things. One, he was there for some of them. Two, he does a lot of research to get the details right. And kind of three, artistic license. But what is important here is that he also has, so Brandon says, has a supernatural ability to retain stories and get close to the actual soul of the story. And then he tells us that we can view these things as canon, except for some places where he obviously fudges a bit, which I don't know what that means, but it doesn't seem like to be a part of these chapters, so we don't need to worry about that.
So, for example, when he's talking about Yumi's side of this story, but he's actually stuck in the noodle pupil, he's kind of going back, maybe like a journalist, and asking people and trying to figure out what her story was, and then is retelling what he's gathered from there.
Essentially, yeah. And there's the supernatural element, right?
Mhm.
We have brought up the idea that maybe he uses connection to connect to some
Yeah.
spiritual ideal of something in the past, whether it is of the story itself, if that exists there, or just connect with the people themselves and just
Mhm.
kind of absorb information about their lives from their spirit webs or something like that, or whether it is some fortune shenanigans where he can like just know the
Mm.
right thing to say. So an interesting little tidbit to keep in mind.
It would be fascinating to see Hoyd do that in a story, like pull a story out of somebody or something. I don't know, it'd be cool to see. But yeah, it does to me read like he has magical means of like knowing what needs to know, plus a little bit of probably just basic journalism. I
He's an
liked his answer.
investigator.
Yeah, Rashara asked a similar question, and I liked his answer. He said that the stories are as accurate as is superhumanly possible. So
Let's move on to inspirations then. We already mentioned some, or I guess we mentioned about how the plot was going to go from the inspiration section. But some of the actual things that were cited during the stream and during Brandon's commentary were Hikaru no Go. I did not say I know I didn't say that right, but I don't know how to say it right. So I'm sorry, but it's a manga that Peter edited because Peter has manga background from before Brandon.
So, and we kind of hit on this one a little bit, like when he was talking about what's going to happen in the next couple of chapters with Yumi and Painter interacting with each other. I guess part of the premise of that is that she's going to have to presumably teach him how to do her thing, and then in his world he'll have to teach her how to do his thing. And so the premise of the manga is that there's a young man finds a possessed Go board. So there's some old Go master who is, I guess, possessing this board game, and young man finds it and the ghost trains him to become a great player at the
Yep.
game. So I guess we'll see Yumi teaching Painter how to stack rocks, and he'll have to teach her how to draw, how to paint,
How to fight nightmares.
how to fight
Really.
nightmares. Sorry, yeah,
Yeah, which is even more
as a
interesting.
lone
right?
warrior.
Solitary wanderer.
Solitary.
Yeah, will he be able to do the job if he's not solid? If he's not?
Yeah, no. Now it's two of them. That's
It
maybe
ruins the
he's
whole
gonna have to
vibe.
like go hide. Yeah.
He mentioned that part of it was. So he mentioned that part of it was he wanting to, like, I guess, let them experience each other's lives. So instead of a typical like body swap story where you are living their life themselves, like he wants them to kind of be there for each other, right? So they're not just switching bodies in two separate worlds apart from each other, having to kind of figure out this other person's life, but they're there to kind of walk alongside one another in that other person's life.
And I imagine part of the story is going to be not only them figuring out and like learning how to live the other person's life, but also them like interacting in the context of this body swap and like teaching each other things. So like Painter might end up teaching Yumi about relaxing. And
Not working
Yumi
so hard.
might- and Yumi on the other hand might teach him, how to not be a lazy bum and actually care about the things that he does, right?
I'm also really interested in the clash of their cultures because in Kilahito, these nightmares, or I guess we could consider them to be similar to spirits, maybe, are hostile. And in Yumi's world in Torio, they're revered and honored, and so that's going to be a huge culture shock for the both of them, I think.
Yeah, Yumi's
be.
culture takes their religion very seriously.
Mm.
So yeah, he'll have to figure that out if he doesn't want to offend everybody.
And Kilahito seems a lot more secular, I think.
Yeah, I don't think we have a single mention of religion in there so
A
far.
ritual or anything. It's just,
Yeah.
Everybody has their job, and it's kind of a big city where everybody kind of pulls their own weight.
Yep.
Well, that actually that makes me think of this other. So another inspiration here is that Brandon mentioned was another story called Your Name, which is an anime. I do not remember the Japanese name. Sorry. I've seen it mentioned a lot of times, but I don't know what it is. Your Name, which is it's an anime with a young woman who have like a body swap thing going on. I actually watched it after learning about it from this. And it was fun. I recommend it. It was cool.
Okay.
It's a bit more of it's a romance story. But the boy is one interesting, I guess, parallel is that the boy lives in Tokyo, the girl lives in like a small village. So a little bit reminiscent of Painter and Yumi there.
Yeah. Very, very reminiscent, really. Just throw the village on a different planet. Easy.
And surround Tokyo by the shroud and nightmares, right?
Yeah. There was a third inspiration that I got on chapter 2 of reading this. I remember I wasn't even done with the reading, and I had to go and tell everybody, oh my gosh, Yumi is Yuna from Final Fantasy X, or at least similar in her upbringing. And I 100% picture this. Like, I picture Yumi as looking like Yuna. So in Final Fantasy X, Yuna is a summoner who's kind of a religious figure who puts lost souls to rest, basically. And I think that is a very good parallel with Yumi's kind of storyline.
I can see some parallels. Yeah. And the last thing obviously comes from our own world, and that's just Korea and Japan. There are obvious elements of these things. Even if you're not familiar with those cultures, you probably get a feel that that this is where this story is coming from. So I think that ends our inspiration section, which I don't want to spend too much time on because there are more exciting things to talk about, such as the characters of this story. Painter Nikaro, our young edgelord, master of solitude. How are we feeling about him?
Yeah, so
Well,
I don't really like him very much when it starts off. I can understand why people do, but the edginess is a bit too much for me. I don't dislike him, but it's that kind of character is like a little more irritating to me. I was really thankful that we got to chapter 7 and got to see him like fight off the one nightmare, and kind of show a little bit of courage and like show that he's not just like a total bum. It's good to see like there's like a hero inside of him, and so I'm glad that we got that far because that made me like him a little bit more than I did before that moment.
Fel, how about you?
I didn't really connect with him as much as Yumi, but I did understand how he felt in certain situations because as an artist, I get art block all the time, and I feel like what he's going through is very similar to art block. Like he doesn't have any inspiration. He just paints bamboo because it works and it's easy. He can just paint it in a couple of strokes, and I completely sympathize with that. The edginess of the character, the loner aspect, I don't quite get as much, but I know people who are like that, and I can understand at least where he's coming from in that respect.
Yeah, and I think like a lot of people probably see that and like identify with it, and they're like, "Oh, like I really like connect with this character, and this is great." And other people probably also connect with it and think, "Oh gosh, I don't want to acknowledge that."
Yeah.
So,
but the thing is, he's not actually a loner. I mean, he's a loner by choice, but he's not like ostracized. People are not mean to him that we've seen. He does mention something about when he was in school. I guess people treated him differently, or maybe he thought people were treating him differently. But now we actually see him interacting with people, and they're inviting him to patrol with them or to eat noodles with them. And he's like, "No, I'm a loner."
I love Design's insistence on like, "Let me just go talk to them," and he's like, "I'm out of here."
It's definitely a self-selected thing, right? He has this image in his head of the lone warrior, right? And a key component of the lone warrior is the loneliness, and so he just kind of stands away from other people and then does his own thing. Even if he doesn't like it, he likes the idea, right?
I love Hoyd describes him. Hoyd says he alternated between comfortable self-delusion and pointless self-pity. And so I definitely like sympathize with him. Like he's in a tough part in life, and he's just trying to like figure it out, and he is kind of stuck in this rut. So
yeah,
I feel bad for him. I hope maybe Yumi will help him get out of that or learn something.
Be a positive influence.
Yeah.
I do hope that as the book progresses, we don't fall back too much on like early chapters Painter and see a little bit more of like chapter 6 Painter or chapter 7 or whatever it was, right? So the more not necessarily heroic, but more proactive figure that we see there. Somebody who doesn't wallow in self-pity most of the time, right?
Well, and to his credit,
goes out and does things.
To his credit, like he does like realize to some extent that like there's I enjoyed his discussion with Design and like going to her and asking her like, do I matter? So like you could tell that he's like thinking about he's not completely caught up in this self-delusion all the time of caught up in this idea that he's this literal like lone warrior that doesn't need anybody. Like there's a sense inside of him that like there's something to work on. So
well, yeah, when he leaves the noodle pupil and he's in the rain and before he sees the new nightmare, he's even thinking about it. He's like, I'm not actually like this, but yeah.
I love that Brandon made that scene happen in the rain just to add to the.
It's perfect. It was so perfect.
If we had gotten him, instead of sitting on the bar, just take a table by the window and just watch as the rain fall outside. Just and like the blue and the magenta electric lights of the Heian out, just perfect ambiance for
angst.
brooding.
Angst.
But let's leave the dark, oppressive world of Painter and his city and talk about Yumi. Fel, why don't you talk to us about this lovely, at least
So-
verbally abused girl?
Yeah. I mean, talk about, if you pardon the pun, night and day with Painter. She is the total opposite end of the spectrum. She's overly obsessed with her, I don't want to say career, like, but her calling. And she wants to go and see other people and dress in plain clothes at the festival, and then she's guilty about it, and like complete opposite of Painter. And I, like I said before, I really identify with Yumi because I always have to have like 100% and have to do everything perfectly, and if I don't, I'm a failure, kind of thing. So I really like Yumi as a character, and I think that her interaction with Painter is going to be quite interesting.
Well, I hope the story goes in a direction where you, as much as Painter, can learn some things about things. Because otherwise, concern.
Yes.
It's so hard for me not to like just love her, if only because of like seeing how she's treated and like seeing these like circumstances that she's lived in. Yeah, I don't know. I come out of these chapters feeling really, really sympathetic for her.
Yeah. Chances are this is the only life she's ever known. Liyun is not. Obviously, she's not a friend, but she's not even friendly to her, right? She's not. I think her role is supposed to be something between like a guardian and a sponsor, is the way Hoyt tells it. And I see the sponsor part maybe, but really warden is a much more appropriate word choice, right? And I from the moment she walked out on a page, I didn't like her very much. But the moment I just hated her was in the scene after Yumi had collapsed, and she wakes up and it's the middle of the night, and she sees Liyun, I guess outside of her wagon, and the way the conversation goes is like, "Hey, I summoned 37 spirits. All right, on a good day, other Yokihijo can summon like 6. That was good, right? Can you say good job?" And Leon's like, "Well, you better do it again." And like, I can imagine a world where there's like a kernel of affection in Liyun, and what she's saying is, look, you great job, you did amazing, but also now that next village really will feel crappy if you don't do the same thing for them. So like maybe build up to doing amazing but like none of this comes from the text. Like this would be purely a headcanon read, right? So I don't like her.
Well, it's not only what you said, but first of all, Liyun walked in on Yumi, and Yumi was crying at the time, and she's just standing there like a shadow in the doorway, and then Yumi's apologizing for it. And then when you said that, she said, well, the next time you better do the same thing. Not only did she say that, but she said, were you holding yourself back every other time?
Yeah.
Like she was like, Yumi has no chance. It's like a catch-22 for her. She can't do well no matter what she does. If she does well or not, she's going to get criticized for it. And I totally sympathize with her in this.
I
Just,
think the thing that melted my heart the most was when the spirit that speaks with her like offers her a boon, and she turns it down, feeling like
Yeah.
she doesn't deserve it.
Mhm.
Man,
big Rapunzel vibes out of Yumi, actually.
Yeah.
I think that's all we have for her. Obviously not main characters, but we would be remiss not to talk about Hoid and design because of not only how significant they are to the Cosmere as a whole, but because they do things in this. Well, Hoid holds coats and bags. He doesn't do much, but design is here, and she's a light weaving attached on what I assume is her like manifestation in the physical realm, which is like patterns. Well,
yeah.
pattern, right? And also there are force projections, so that if you push on the light weaving, it pushes back on you, so it feels like flesh. Which that's a thing you can do with light weaving, apparently.
Well,
if you
so
were
I don't know.
Hoid.
I don't know that it's necessarily light weaving though. Like it
Mm.
could be some other kind of magic he's using. But I mean, it's important for her obviously because she's like interacting with the physical world. Like she's like serving up bowls of noodles, so she has to be able to pick things up. I mean, ultimately, I guess it's just a convenience for Brandon to be able to like have her be a character.
Mhm.
um,
I find it really funny because when I picture Design's face, sometimes I see it in my mind like glitching a little bit, like like pixelating or something. Because it says like she wanted to be curvy because she wanted to kind of distract people from her
Yeah.
face.
well, what she says is, I want if the illusion falls apart, I want them that much more disturbed by what is underneath. Which is, how can you not love design? Like,
Yeah, she's
even
a cinnamon roll.
even without light weaving bazongas.
I liked her before, but she's definitely next level now on I don't know. It's Brandon's humor doesn't always land for me, but design is perfect.
Mhm.
Yeah, it's so deadpan, and the delivery is fantastic all the time, and the way she plays off of Hoid in many places.
Mhm.
Obviously, in the Dog and the Dragon, we saw them interact directly, but here, just the way her narrative plays off of his kind of background narration is
She turns him into a coat rack. Number one.
With a crown.
I love her her insistence on only giving discounts on prime number intervals.
because she has standards.
Yeah, there's just
Yes,
so many
because
like
of course.
quirks to her. Oh, it's great.
And she counts every grain of every seasoning, and that way her food is the best because it's always the same.
Fantastic.
She's scientifically determined the best way to make a bowl of noodles, and
And now she makes it every time,
Yeah.
exactly the same way. God, I'm craving noodles now. I've had this low key craving ever since these chapters dropped, and now it's just
it's time.
Get your Maypon sticks.
talk about that later. Because we do need to move the episode along because we are like halfway through and it's been an hour. Let's leave. Well, any other character? We touched on Leon a bit.
Mhm.
And maybe we'll touch on her again with like baseball bats or something. I don't know. Any other characters we want to mention?
I don't think so. So we've got Painter
yeah.
has like his like colleagues that we interacted
Akane and
with,
Tojin.
Yep.
but we haven't really met them much.
Yeah. And we have the two servants of Yumi, but they
Mhm.
just hold fronds around her.
They bathe her.
Yeah, very, very important. Cool. Let's move on to talking about the story and the plot themselves, right? And we touched a little bit on that earlier when we talked about how the next few chapters will go along, and how the body swap will play out. Is there anything about the body swap that we didn't touch on that we are interested in?
It'll be really interesting to see how those other side characters react to like Painter being in Yumi's position and Yumi being in Painter's position. I think it'll be very difficult for Painter, particularly because there's so much expectation of
Yeah.
Yumi. And not only that, but she takes it in stride and he has no idea. So she's going to have to be teaching him on the fly, and it'll be an experience for him. And then the characters actually seeing how he's acting, I think that's going to lead to some conflicts.
They are going to recognize that something is off, like
Instantly.
immediately. Yeah,
Yes.
even if he tries to do his best, which
Mhm.
it's Painter. I don't know about that.
Yeah.
But even yeah. So spicy chapters ahead of us. I didn't think there would be much to talk about. Body swap. So who put romance in my outline?
It wasn't me.
Explain yourself, Jofwu.
So, so one thing Brandon was asked about, this might have just come up naturally in the live stream. I don't see a question about it specifically, but Brandon said that one, I guess part of the inspiration of writing this book and Secret Project 1 was putting a little bit more romance into the Cosmere, more than he usually writes. And so he says that there's a little bit of romance in this story. I don't know that it's entirely clear at this point.
I mean, we
What
already
that would
saw
look
it between
like.
Painter and design.
Forgive
One-sided
me.
romance.
Forgive me.
I don't know if I would call that romance.
Yeah, so I guess we'll have to see how that develops more. I'm intrigued because I don't really care for Brandon's romance usually. I should clarify, he doesn't say this is a romance book, but there's, I guess, romance features prominently in it more so than he typically writes, is what he's saying. So I'm
And that
curious
applies
to see
to
how.
Tress as well.
Right. And I'm curious to see how it lands. It's encouraging. One thing we have not mentioned so far, Brandon says that this is his favorite of the secret projects, which is really bizarre because Brandon never, like, you ask Brandon
Never
what's
has
your favorite
favorites.
book, and he never picks a favorite. And so it's really fascinating to hear him
Yeah.
make that decision in this case. I think like probably 5 years from now, if you're like, oh, is that still your favorite book? He's going to be like, no, just at the time, like that was the one that was particularly
Yeah.
special. But he wrote the romance largely for Emily, his wife, and this is also her favorite of them. So I'm curious to see if that's part of Wind, if that really landed well for her.
I mean, I feel like it must have, right? If that's her fave.
Mm-hmm.
So
yeah, interesting to see how that's going to play out, because I am also not reading the Cosmere for the romance. There are cute scenes here and there. I think there's some really nice character stuff between Wax and Steris, for example, that I really like. And I don't know if that's a Brandon thing, or just in that Brandon can write romance very well, or if I'm just not interested in romance in general, and so I would be like, romance in the Cosmere is equally uninteresting to me as, romance novels themselves.
Well, I love romantic subplots in books. I love relationships in general, not just romantic relationships. And putting two 19-year-olds together, stuck together for a while, is just the perfect like recipe for a cute, developing, budding romance, I think.
It's very convenient too, because like it gives you an excuse to have the characters in the same place.
Yeah, forced proximity, I think, is what they call it in the romantic genre.
Wish that happened to me when I was 19.
Oh,
just have a star hit me on the head. God knows I was just about as edgy. Anyway, so having wrapped up the romance, this is all of the romance that ever exists. There's no more romance in the world. The next thing we should talk about is the actual plot of the plot, right? What happens in the book. Obviously, we don't know much more beyond just body swap shenanigans and character development. But we do have a couple of hooks that are going to be sending us into what I assume is going to be Act 2. And one of them is the spirit that speaks to Yumi when she's kind of at her lowest point, and she hears the voice that she decides comes from the star, the sun, really. Although she calls it a day star.
Well, it's not a sun, right? It's a star, at least as far as she knows. Are you
Yeah,
on
but
the
the
same
sun
page
is
there?
the sun is a star.
No. So they have a sun. The day star is
Candid.
not the sun.
Oh,
Yep.
oh, wow.
Yeah,
Okay,
so
sure.
maybe we need an astronomy lesson. No, no. So they do have a large reddish sun that Hoy describes, but there is the day star is a star. It's not clear to me like if it's only up during the day. I guess the last chapter it's nighttime and the day star is still up, right?
Mhm.
So that's not really clear to me exactly when the star is.
It's kind of like a blue star in the
bluish.
sky.
Did you guys read the same chapters as I did? I don't
Yeah.
remember any of that stuff.
So there's the day star that she sees. Yeah, when she's talking to the spirit, she sees the star. Does she assume the spirit is
There.
speaking from there?
Yeah. She's like, oh, it's a distant. The voice is coming very faintly. It must be from there. Yeah. Anyway, but so the implication is that their worlds are their worlds see the other world as like a star, right? That's the implication somehow. And the spirit is on Yumi's world, and somehow the spirit is bonking. No, sorry. The spirit is on Painter's world, and that's why Yumi sees it as being far away. And that same spirit bonks Painter on the head, and that's the way that's the one person that he tells Yumi might be able to help her free them. And that's, I think, our big plot for the book. The end of Act 1 zinger is, oh, the spirits haven't been free and just enjoying art. They've been trapped or imprisoned in some way, and they want out.
Or at least the one spirit.
So, what I gathered when I was reading it, and I have the quote about the star that it was supposedly coming from. It says, it seemed so very tired, and it was distant, barely able to reach her. She looked up to the sparkling sky, and the bright day star, stronger than them all, was the spirit talking to her from there. So, what I thought, this was my initial thought when I read these chapters. The spirit is talking to her from Painter's world on the day star, and it is one of the nightmares possibly, and they're trapped somehow, and they see that Yumi is doing so well with the 37 summoned spirits that they plot to kind of pull her over there, but in doing so Painter kind of got jettisoned to her star or planet. That was what my impression was. I have no idea, but
yeah. No. I'm thinking the nightmares could be either exactly the same spirits as the Hijo that Yumi interacts with, but over there, or they could be some twisted, corrupted, changed, or related version of the Hijo.
Because of the shroud, maybe.
Maybe because of the shroud, maybe because of something else that caused both the shroud and this change in them, right?
The similarities between the Hijo and the nightmares are there. The Hijo can turn into light sources and devices and things. And what Painter does with the nightmares is he turns them into bamboo, or he turns them into something that they could be. So that's where my brain is at, connecting the two of them and making some kind of plot from that.
Yeah, that could be it. And the parallel story I imagine we're gonna have is Painter, or rather Yumi, whom other are going to see as Painter, needs to deal with this stable nightmare that is
Mhm.
almost powerful enough to cause the deaths of hundreds, I believe.
Yeah, they said that 30 years ago was the last one, and it destroyed a whole city or town.
Yeah.
I'm a little concerned for the family that he saves the family and he's like, oh, I just got to go tell the foreman. No, I think I'll go to
Mhm.
bed. And now it's
Yeah,
kinda
to
like,
give them the funds to get through this ordeal. Yeah. I mean, obviously, Yumi's going to figure out about that when she wakes up
yeah.
as Painter, and she's going to be like feeling duty bound to help them. So,
Oh gosh, yeah, she is.
Hopefully he's going to tell her. I mean, he will, right? This
yeah,
is
that would
gonna
be
the
pretty
first
messed
thing.
up if he didn't. Yeah.
Yeah. No,
Once they figure out what's going on.
unless there's like memory loss involved, right? That's what I
true.
mean.
That's true. Yeah.
But yeah, this
Eh
plot, this is probably like the B plot.
I would assume like that's what that means in terms of like Brandon talking about having to like learn each other's like things is like
Mhm.
she's gonna have to deal with that whole painting nightmares.
Mhm.
And obviously he'll have to learn her stuff to figure out whatever's going on with the spirit. Unless they're tied together, right? With the spirit, if the spirit is coming from his world, and so then then it's all
Yep.
tangled together. And
I just had this idea, like a picture in my mind of Yumi trying to paint and it's like stick figures, and the nightmare turns into stick figures.
she's
That
gonna
would
go.
be an excellent scene.
She's gonna go stack rocks, so the nightmares turn into rocks, and he's gonna paint stacks of rocks.
That's the true magic system of these worlds. Magical rock stacks. All right, story wrapped. We've talked about the story. There's nothing else in this story that we need to talk about. End of episode, but no, just kidding. Well, partially kidding. So what we are going to do is we are going to cut this episode here. This is going to be a very nice, comfortable, cozy 1 hour-ish episode. And then next time, we are going to come back and talk about the setting, because there are interesting things that need more time than we have right now. The nightmares, the shroud, the Heon lines, the fact that Painter's World sees another world in the sky, like they're shooting a magic rocket up there. That's something we need to talk about. Obviously, we haven't spent much time talking about the magic itself, with Painter's ability to transform nightmares and Yumi's ability to draw spirits. And somehow we've gone an entire episode without mentioning the new shard that we got in this book, virtuosity. So we're going to talk about that next time as well. And I think all of these things are going to wrap up pretty nicely into a package where we started off nice and easy with setting and magic stuff, and then we expand into like Cosmere things, and we're also going to cover the rest of the WOBs from this story's live stream. So, any final wrapping thoughts before we cut this?
Just that I'm excited to see the characters more. I don't know. I love them.
I have a feeling this is going to be my favorite of the 4.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, and you have been excited to give us an art lecture on this stuff. So I don't
No.
feel like we've gotten that so far. So maybe that will also come in next episode. Okay. Oh, we're not doing who's that Cosmere character, because we need to crank this out quickly, and we have a lot of episodes. So we're gonna wrap this up. You can find us at 70shard.com. We have news in there. We have theories in there. We have discussions in there. Sometimes we have fun. We try to have fun. Other places you can find us are Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. Now you can follow us there for art and shares. SoundCloud is another place you can listen to this podcast. YouTube, where we are trying to branch off into a little bit more content than just Shardcast. If you are so inclined, you can support us on Patreon. Our lowest tier is just $1, and that gives you nice things. I think. Oh, iTunes. I know there's a thing you can do on iTunes that's not like and subscribe, so you can also do that. But that is the end of this episode. We'll come back next week with more Yumi and the Nightmare Painter, where we talk about the world and how that world connects to the larger multi-world of the multi-world. That's terrible. To the larger Cosmere. So leave us a comment. Do the YouTube things. You've been on YouTube before. You know how it works. And we'll see you next time. Bye.
Goodbye.
Cool.